Dr. Makarand Paranjape ji. Welcome, sir. Dr. Sachidanand Mishra ji, Dr. Shimla ji, and Sampath Bhai. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to inaugurate this series of lectures, which commemorates not just India at 75, but also Sri Aurobindo at 150. In my view, this is a never before, never after conjuncture. Will, I think, give us an opportunity, those of us who are interested, to reflect deeply on the meaning not only of our independence, but also on Sri Aurobindo's immense contribution to modern life, to modern civilization, to the future of the human race itself. So I feel very grateful for this opportunity. And to my young friends who are not sure why they're still sitting here, what I want to say to you is that we sometimes feel that we are doing these things for India or Sri Aurobindo, but once you go into it a little deeply, you will discover that this is an opportunity for us actually to grow and to fulfill our own potential as human beings. At least to me, that is how I look at these opportunities. Not just to share one's thoughts, but really to deepen one's own understanding of India and of the work of Sri Aurobindo. So with these words, I just wanted to once again thank Sampath Bhai for this initiative and thank ICPR for organizing this lecture series. We talk about Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and it seems to me that even this phrase Amrit is actually from Sri Aurobindo. And I can give you the quotation because he says in his talk he gave in Nashik, he says that, and this was a talk he gave on the 24th of January in 1908, which was 2 years actually before Gandhiji wrote in Swaraj, when the SS killed an pastor in Southampton, South Africa. Sri Aurobindo made a speech in Nashik, Maharashtra. It's not very well known or famous speech, and in fact, we would have known of it had it not been for the CID. Somebody from the CID was present and made notes on the speech, and then it was reported in a newspaper in Marathi the following day. But it is in the collected works of Sri Aurobindo, the complete works of Sri Aurobindo. So he says, it was, as I said, reported in the Nashik Vrtta in the next morning. So he says, if we do not acquaint ourselves with the object in view, viz. Swaraj, I'm afraid we 30 crores of people will become extinct. Swaraj is life. It is nectar and salvation. So that nectar, Amrit, I think comes from this speech. Maybe it's unintentional. We don't know where they got it from. But I found that in 1908, Sri Aurobindo had used nectar as a description for Swaraj. Swaraj in a nation is the breath of life. Without breath of life, a man is dead. So also without Swaraj, a nation is dead. Swaraj being the life of a nation, it is essential for it. What I want to do today is I've actually prepared a small write-up, and I can read it. It will only take a few minutes, maybe at the most 10 minutes. Then we can simply have a discussion around it, if you like. Is that all right? Is that a good plan? Because I think we've already exceeded, what was there at 5:30? It's already 5:30. Yeah? No, I don't want to keep people for too long. So it's a very short talk that I have prepared on Sri Aurobindo's idea of Swaraj. So let me just do that. Then I will elaborate on it with a few, other ideas. So I'm calling it Bhavani Mandir Revisited because Sri Aurobindo wrote a very interesting pamphlet called Bhavani Mandir in 1905 when he was working for the Maharaja of Baroda. Before his nationalist phase actually began in earnest, when he became the inaugural principal of the National College in Kolkata, which then became, of course, Jadavpur University. Sri Aurobindo elaborates on the meaning of Swaraj in this speech. He says, if we do not acquaint ourselves with the object in view, which is Swaraj, I'm afraid we 30 crores of people will become extinct. Swaraj is life, it is nectar and salvation. Swaraj in a nation is the breath of life. Without breath, a man is dead. So without Swaraj, a nation is dead. Swaraj being the life of a nation, it is essential for it. But the roots of Sri Aurobindo's experiments and ideas for freeing India go back much farther, even to his days as a Cambridge undergraduate. So he was part of a secret society called the Lotus and the Dagger, and he attended its first meeting in 1893. So he was born in 1872. So in 1893, he was only 21 years of age. He was doing the classical tripod at Cambridge, and he attended the secret society. And of course, the secret society never met a second time. So it was an abortive attempt. But much later, when I talk about the speech he gave in Nashik, Sri Aurobindo was associated with two secret societies, the Anushilan Samiti and Juganta. And his own brother, Barindra, was learning how to make bombs. Anyhow, so the next kind of vignette, the point I'm trying to make is way back in 1893, Sri Aurobindo already had resolved that India should be free and that it should have complete independence from the British. Why is this important? Let's not forget that the Congress came up with their poorna swaraj resolution on the 29th of December in 1929 in the Lahore session. So think about Sri Aurobindo talking about poorna swaraj in 1907, but also thinking about it way back in 1893. When he was in the Maharaja of Baroda's service, he was involved in some experiments. And one of them was a seance. Okay? So what happens in a seance? You are supposed to communicate with people who are dead, who are on the other side. And the medium of the seance was his own brother Barindra. And he received an intriguing message. Who is Sri Ramakrishna? Yes. You know at the back? Last row. Who is Sri Ramakrishna? Yeah. One of you can ask. Yes, who is he? Very good. Thank you. Thank you. So imagine Sri Aurobindo trying to communicate with the dead spirit of Sri Ramakrishna through a seance. Okay? And his brother himself was the medium. What is the message he got? He got only two words. Mandir Gado. Make a temple. What does it mean? It's an intriguing message. And Sri Aurobindo interpreted it as a commandment to propagate a new revolutionary creed based on the consecration of a temple to Mother India. This would not be a physical temple, as much as a nationwide movement in which Mother India was invoked as Bharat Shakti. Who is it that first talked about Mother India? And there's the famous song that we all know. Who is it that talked about that? The nation as a goddess. I'll ask somebody else in the last row. Yes. No idea. You don't know Bande Mataram? Who wrote Bande Mataram? Bankim. So he wrote it as an independent song, but it was also part of Anandamat, the novel. And Sri Aurobindo was very influenced by Bankim. In fact, in Indu Prakash in 1894, after he came back from England, he wrote a series of essays called Rishi Bankim, because it was Bankim who conceptualized the nation as a goddess. So it is a Sanatan Parampara that you can create goddesses, okay? Just as gods and goddesses create you. Many times in Delhi, it's very difficult to find parking. So you can have a parking goddess. So you pray to the parking goddess and maybe you'll get a parking slot. Or you can pray to the examination goddess. Okay, you can try. Anyhow, so it is Bankim who created a goddess and called Mother India, as it were. And then you have this beautiful song, Vande Mataram, which is homage to the mother. Okay, and Sri Aurobindo builds on it, and he talks about Bharat Shakti. And he wrote a pamphlet called Bhavani Mandir. How do we know he wrote the pamphlet? Because when he was arrested in the Alipur bomb trial, this was a part of the evidence, this pamphlet called Bhavani Mandir. But it was signed by Barindra. It was Barindra's brother's signature on it, and on the cover. But here is what he says in Bhavani Mandir. He says, we in India fail in all things for want of Shakti. So this is true even today. Wherever we fail, it's because we lack Shakti, we lack power, we lack energy, we lack the will to succeed. Okay? He says, we have all things else, but we are empty of strength, void of energy. We have abandoned Shakti and are therefore abandoned by Shakti. The consequences of such weakness are disastrous. That's the heading of another section of verse. Okay, so this is important for all of us who are in the intellectual field. Sri Aurobindo says our knowledge is a dead thing for want of Shakti. So all of us who spent all our time as teachers or students, we have to reflect on this. We want to be a Vishwa Guru, but we are in a state of terrible intellectual decline in India. Okay? We don't produce new ideas, we repeat old ideas, and we don't respect the life of the mind. We respect power, we respect money, we respect other such things. We don't respect the intellect, we may call our university Rishigul, but are we really going to produce Rishis? Maybe Sampath Bhai will, but I don't know. But as a country, we don't respect knowledge, we don't respect the intellect. And this is something that Sri Aurobindo talked about 115 years ago. And for us, knowledge is only instrumental. You pass an exam, whether it's the NET or the central CUET or the IIAS. Knowledge is instrumental. You pass an exam, you get a job. That's all knowledge is for. We don't love knowledge for the sake of knowledge, as the ancient Indians did. That's why we were at the forefront of knowledge. And today we're really at the back. There is no Indian university which is in the top 100 in the world, according to the QS rankings. Okay, not a single one. And IISc and the others, some of the IITs, are not in the first 100. So it's something for us to think about. And Sri Aurobindo says, our knowledge is a dead thing for want of Shakti. And then he says that our knowledge is inadequate and cannot save us. Why? Because, and I'm quoting him, it is a dead knowledge, a burden under which we are bowed, a poison which is corroding us, rather than as it should be a staff to support our feet and a weapon in our hands. Why is he saying that? Why is he so harsh? And his answer is, again I'm quoting him, our knowledge then is weighed down with a heavy load of tamas. Okay? It lies under the curse of impotence and inertia. It's for you to think about how true it is today. It is Swami Vivekananda who said that in India, sattva is actually tamas masquerading as something to think about. What we really need is rajas. And Vivekananda said, go and play football, don't read the Gita. Build up some muscle. Then Sri Aurobindo comes to something that we Indians are very easy and very prone to do, which is devotion. Whoever it is, we'll pedestalize it. Okay? Whether it's our Prime Minister or Sri Aurobindo. We are great devotees, but our devotion is not sincere. Because in our hearts we don't feel the devotion. We just do it. Okay? Whether it's also for the Tiranga. It's for you to think about. And why is he saying, what is Sri Aurobindo saying? If India has been a knowledge society for millennia, we are also not lacking in bhakti or devotion. But, and I'm quoting Sri Aurobindo, our bhakti cannot live and work for want of shakti. So our bhakti or devotion is also weak. Without strength, even devotion is useless. And Sri Aurobindo says, in the absence of shakti, we cannot concentrate, we cannot direct, we cannot even preserve it. Dharana, in the Yoga Sutra, then dhyana, then samadhi. We can't concentrate. Isn't it true? Today, we are always on our phone, and you try to read a book, and in 30 seconds, your mind is wandering off. And my own students tell me sometimes, don't give us fat books to read. Okay? Give us only summaries. So we are not able to concentrate. And this is what Sri Aurobindo says. But the good news is, what he's saying is, no man or nation need be weak unless he chooses. No man or nation need perish unless he deliberately chooses extinction. And luckily for us, I think we are free today thanks to people like Sri Aurobindo and many other freedom fighters that we heard about. But do we deserve this freedom? What are we doing to make our country, our civilization, and our incomplete renaissance, okay? What are we doing to finish it? What are we doing to make our country great today? So what Sri Aurobindo says is that the cultivation and exaltation of strength is the crying want of Indians. And that was the motto of Bhavani Mandir, an idea that harkens back to Swami Vivekananda's injunction. He says, strength and manliness are virtue, weakness and cowardice are sin. And he also says, this is Swami Vivekananda, this is a great fact. Strength is life, weakness is death. Strength is felicity, life eternal, immortal. Weakness is constant strain and misery. Weakness is death. I already mentioned how Sri Aurobindo had elaborated his idea of poorna swaraj, or complete political independence. He also did it in a two-part essay called The Doctrine of Passive Resistance. Okay? Because in 1906, in December, Dadabhai Navroji, when he gave the valedictory address to Congress in Kolkata, said that we want Swaraj. But nobody defined what Swaraj was. Even Gandhiji in his Swaraj translated it as Indian home rule. And for many years, they were negotiating whether it would be dominion status within the empire, some kind of adjustment with the British. It's only Sri Aurobindo who said we want the kind of independence that Britain has. Full independence. And he said it long before the Congress came out with that resolution. So when we talk about this conjuncture of India at 75 and Sri Aurobindo at 150, is it an accident that India's independence is also Sri Aurobindo's birthday? Certainly Sri Aurobindo did not think so. In an address that he gave to the All India Radio Tiruchirappalli, he says, 15th August is the birthday of free India. To me personally, it must be naturally gratifying that this date, which was notable only for me because it was my own birthday, is celebrated annually by those who have accepted my gospel of life, should have acquired this vast significance. So I invite all of you to go to Sri Aurobindo's 5 Dreams. It's a great speech he gave on the eve of India's independence in 1947. He elaborates what his 5 dreams are. And one of them is, of course, India's independence. But he says this independence is truncated because India is still divided. I'm talking about K.M. Munshi, who founded the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in 1938. He was one of the few people who had the occasion to meet Sri Aurobindo. in 1950. Sri Aurobindo left his body on the 5th of December 1950, and K. M. Munshi was the central minister then, cabinet minister. Went to Pondicherry with Morarji Desai and had the privilege of meeting Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo makes a prophecy that the partition of India is not a permanent thing. So you can read that record. It is in Nirod Baran's, record of Sri Aurobindo for the youth. That's the name of the book. You can take a look at it. But it's also very interesting that K. Munshi was a student of Sri Aurobindo in Baroda College, because Sri Aurobindo was the vice principal of Baroda College. If you go to Baroda or Vadodara, as it is called today, you must go to this building called Baroda College. It's a magnificent building with the second largest dome in India. Which is the largest dome in India? Anybody? No, as far as I know, that's not the correct answer. Anybody else? And it's not the Taj Mahal. Which is the largest dome in India? Yeah? No? Bijapur. Who said that? Thank you, sir. So this is the second largest dome of Baroda College. So go and see it. It's still a very inspiring place where Sri Aurobindo taught. But K. M. Munshi was born in, if I'm not mistaken, in 1888. So he's 15 years younger than Sri Aurobindo. Attended his class, and this is what he had to say about Sri Aurobindo. I want to read you a little passage of his reminiscences of Sri Aurobindo. He says, and I quote K. M. Munshi, I remember only one occasion when I directly talked to Professor Arvind Ghosh. How could nationalism be developed? He pointed to a wall map of India and said something to this effect. Look at that map. No map, but imagine a map of India. At that time, undivided India. Look at that map. Learn to find in it the portrait of Bharat Mata. The cities, mountains, rivers, and forests are the material which go to make up our body. The people inhabiting the country are the cells which go to make up her living tissues. Our literature is her memory and speech. The spirit of her culture is her soil. The happiness and freedom of her children is her salvation. Behold Bharat as the living mother. Meditate upon her and worship her in the ninefold way of bhakti. So I think this is a very profound statement for all of us today, because when he writes to his wife Mrinalini about his three madnesses, this is a letter of his on 30th August 1905, and he tells his wife that he is afflicted by three madnesses. He says one of his madnesses is this: while others look upon their country as an inert piece of matter, a few meadows and fields, forests and hills and rivers, look upon her as the mother. What would a son do if a demon sat on his mother's breast and started sucking her blood? Would he quietly sit down to his dinner, amuse himself with his wife and children, or would he rush out to deliver his mother? I know I have the strength to deliver this fallen race. It is not physical strength. I'm not going to fight with sword or gun, but it is the strength of knowledge. This feeling is not new in me. It is not of today. I was born with it. It is in my very marrow. Now, so this is a very interesting letter. I invite you to read it. But what Sri Aurobindo is saying is that it is knowledge which is going to save us. And he has that knowledge. What is that knowledge? I invite you to try and read Sri Aurobindo's works. And some people say it is the knowledge of the supermind, how the whole of humanity will be transformed and have higher consciousness. But even before we reach that far, it is certainly the knowledge of how to complete our unfinished renaissance. And it is not by rejecting modernity or what the West has discovered. It is not by trying to return to some golden age in the past, or simply reconnecting with what we've lost. It is something much more complicated and much more difficult. It is really the assimilation of whatever is available in the world and making it your own through a process of hard work and engagement. So it is neither rejection nor imitation. It is neither subservience nor defiance. It is the third way. And Sri Aurobindo has a sense of his great mission because if you read The Secret of the Veda, you will see how he comes up with a completely new hermeneutics, completely new way of reading the Veda. Because he says after Shankara, the understanding of the Veda got split into Karma Kanda, which was only doing for rituals, being done for rituals, and the Vedanta, which Shankara said, was enough for your salvation, for soteriological purposes. And it is Sri Aurobindo who reunifies, the great knowledge of the Veda. But you should also see his only Sanskrit poem, Bhavani Bharati, 99 verses, which Sampath Bhai has recited, the incarnate word, where he starts with the same metaphor of a demon sucking the blood, of Mother India, and how the children of India must rise and save her from this horrible ogre, this creature. And of course, we paid a terrible price for independence, as the Minister of State just reminded us. I think the figures of 2 million are vastly exaggerated by the partition industry. But even so, whether it's 200,000 or 2 million, it was too high a price to pay. And this is where we can bring in K. Munshi, who resigned from the Congress because he did not agree with Gandhiji's idea of non-resistance to violence. Because Gandhiji said if the Muslims come and attack you during the partition riots, you should not resist them. With the result that Congress workers usually ran away, And K. Munshi wrote to Gandhiji, said, this is terrible. So Gandhiji said, if you don't agree, you should resign from the Congress because the Congress is for non-violence. K. Munshi resigned. And Gandhiji and he were still very good friends. In fact, he considered Gandhiji his guru. So it was a time when people disagreed with each other. And certainly Sri Aurobindo disagreed with Gandhiji on his, I would call it, fetishization of non-violence. I've written a book on Gandhiji's last days. It's called The Death and Afterlife of Mahatma Gandhi. And when he came to Delhi on the 20th of September, after quelling the riots in Calcutta, in his prayer meetings, you see that he acknowledges that his idea of non-violence had failed. And when the raiders invade Kashmir, he tells Jawaharlal Nehru to send the troops, to airlift the troops to Srinagar. And because of that airlift, Srinagar was saved. Because they had come right up to Pathankot. They were rioting and raping in Pathankot. You can read the record. So Gandhiji gave up on non-violence. Except that he said, let the state have the monopoly on violence. So he goes to the mosque in Daryaganj and says, give up your weapons. You're now a part of India. It is the responsibility of the state to protect you. And he says, support the Home Minister, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Anyhow, so Sri Aurobindo disagreed with Gandhiji and he said that in India, we never renounced violence completely for dharma. For him, the ideal was Krishna, who exhorts Arjuna to fight. Of course, Gita was the favorite book of Gandhiji too. But for Gandhiji, Gita was entirely an internal battle between different parts of your own psyche. Anyhow, so all of this happened in India, and the partition was a terrible loss. Maybe if he had followed Sri Aurobindo, there might not have been a partition. Stafford Cripps came to India. Sri Aurobindo said, remember he had said we want only poorna swaraj. But he said no, accept dominion status. But the Congress said no. We launched the Quit India movement. And of course, Subhash Bose's Azad Hind Fauj lost in Kohima. That's the history of India. We could not defeat the British. They left. Okay? And even now, it is called the transfer of power. Okay? It was not a revolution which pushed them out. So, Uh, Now I come to a very interesting part of Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo's life when he was incarcerated in Alipur jail from 1908 to 1909, when he had a number of spiritual experiences. And he said, after he got out of jail, he gave a famous speech in Uttar Pada, okay, to the Dharma Rakshini Sabha. And that is where he said that when it is said that India should expand and extend herself, it is the Sanatan Dharma that shall expand and extend itself over the world. It is for Dharma and by the Dharma that India exists. But for Sri Aurobindo, the Sanatan Dharma was not a narrow or sectarian creed. He says that that which we call Hindu religion is really the eternal religion, because it is the universal religion which embraces all others. If a religion is not universal, it cannot be eternal. A narrow religion, a sectarian religion, an exclusive religion can only live for a limited time and a limited purpose. This is the one religion that can triumph over materialism by including and anticipating the discoveries of science and the speculations of philosophy. So here's another speech that I invite everyone to read, the Uttar Pada speech. And he says that the Sanatan Dharma, that is nationalism. I think this sums up Sri Aurobindo's idea of Swaraj. Swaraj is really ultimately a spiritual idea. That is what it was in our Upanishads, in the Chandogya Upanishad, in the Upanishad, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and in the Kaushitaki Upanishad. It is also available in the Rig Veda, in 180. There is a whole sukta on Swarajya, but it describes the qualities of Indra. Archar Anuswarajya. All the lines end with that refrain. And Sri Aurobindo revives this idea of the spiritual transformation of humanity being the real purpose of Swaraj. So Swaraj is not just political independence or even economic independence, but Swarajya is self-illumination. It is self-realization. It is the psychic awakening. It is the understanding of our true nature. And if you read the Taittiriya Upanishad, it is actually said that Indra was able to defeat the Asuras only when he knew who he was. So self-knowledge is essential. You cannot become Virat without being Swaraj. So Swarajya is self-restraint, it is also resistance to evil. And you see something similar in Gandhiji's in Swaraj as well. But we can end by looking at the strange circumstances which made this ancient word become a part of the vocabulary of modern India. And the strange circumstance was that there was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, an early disciple. He was a Maharashtrian who was born and lived in Bengal. He was born in Devgarh, and his name is Devskar. And this gentleman, was also Balindra's teacher in the Devgarh school. And he wrote a book in Bangla called Desher Katha, okay, which became a very, very popular book. It sold 10,000 copies in 1 year. And not only that, it went into 5 or 6 editions very fast. And then it was banned. It was banned by the British because that was a book in which what Devskar did is he disillusioned the youth of India of that great fascination for the British. He showed how the British had pauperized India, something that Dadabhai Naoroji also wrote later in a book called, I think he called it the, it was a book, what is the name of Dadabhai Naoroji's book? Un-British Rule in India, Indian Poverty and the Un-British Rule in India. That's the first book where the drain theory of how colonialism drained our wealth was outlined in great detail. But the person I'm talking about, his name is Sakharam Ganesh Deoskar, 1869-1912. Now, he wrote this book, Deshir Katha, in 1904, and it was banned, as I told you. But Deoskar, inspired by Lokmanya Tilak and others, he started organizing a Shivaji Utsav in Bengal, and he wrote a biography of Shivaji. It's interesting how Brahmabandha Upadhyay also wrote about Swarajya in his newspaper called Sandhya. And prior to that, in 1857, we have the first biography or the first book on Shivaji, which was written in 1857, the year of the Great Revolt. And this was a book written by a very interesting man whom we have completely forgotten today. His name is Bhudev Mukhopadhyay. Has anybody heard of Bhudev Mukhopadhyay? He wrote another very interesting book called Swapna Labdher Bharatiya Itihas, which was published in 1897. So it was a book in which he imagined India's independence or India's history had the British not come, to India. So these are books that we have to go back to and read deeply. But the point I'm trying to make is that Shivaji and the Marathas had already become a figure in India's imagination in Bengal in the 19th century. And this was another way to remember them, because otherwise they were only raiders. Remember, Bengal was ruled by the Nawabs. Alivardi Khan was the Nawab of Bengal when the Marathas and the Peshwa were raiding Bengal and extracting Chauth and Sardesh Mukhi. So people in Bengal and Odisha don't like the Marathas. They consider them, what are they called? Bardis or something. No? There's a word for them, raiders, they're called raiders. But here in Bengal, they tried to revive the idea of Shivaji. And Shivaji's notion of Hindavi Swaraj, which actually went back to Krishnadeva Raya and possibly to Vidyaranya, who was the guru of I think, Harihar and Bukharaya. So, what I'm simply trying to say is that this idea of resisting the subjugation of India, the spirit of Swaraj was never completely lost through the 1,000 years of our colonialism. And somehow it was reignited in Bengal by a person we've forgotten today, whose name is Deoskar. And it got picked up by Dadabhai Naoroji on the 29th of December in 1906. And from there, Tilak said, Swarajya is my birthright, I shall have it. Sri Aurobindo talks about Swarajya. Gandhiji wrote Hind Swaraj in 1909 in November. And so this word came back into our vocabulary and our imagination. And finally, as I've explained, Sri Aurobindo picked it up and gave it its deeper spiritual meaning and linked it up not only with the independence of India, but with the transformation of the world itself. Because the rise of India for Sri Aurobindo was one step, a necessary step, in the transformation of planetary life on Earth. So with these words, I thank you all very much, and I also invite younger people to read the works of Sri Aurobindo.